Hello? Okay. My mic's working today, thank goodness. Hey guys, what's going on? I hope y'all are having a good day. And today we are going to be doing a pretty interesting topic. We're going to be talking about identity politics. So I had a speech that I did on Tuesday, and it didn't go the way that I wanted it to. And I recorded a video yesterday talking about it, and none of the audio recorded. So that's awesome. So we're going to do it again. Okay, so how do I want to start with this? Because I had anyways, but the speech was talking about various different political issues, like transgender people in sports and abortion. So it got pretty heated in some instances. So what is identity politics? We should probably define that first before we start talking about it. So let me look up a definition real quick. So, as stated by Wikipedia, um, identity politics is politics based on a particular identity, such as ethnicity, race, nationality, religion, denomination, gender, sexual orientation, social background, caste, and social class. The term encompasses various often populist political phenomena and rhetoric, such as governmental migration policies that regulate mobility and opportunity based on identities, left wing agendas involving intersectional politics or class reductionism, and right wing nationalist agendas of exclusion of national or ethnic others. So, yeah, so that's basically just breaking down identity politics in a situation where saying people on the left are more open to people coming to the country, and people on the right are more closed minded. Just basically what that was saying. So real quick, let's write down some things that can um, affect identity politics other than that. So we'll make two different schools of thought. Okay, perfect. So for the first one, this is going to be things like emotion, um, religion, tradition. Tradition as in like what your family thinks. Um, like if your parent has an idea and you're a young kid and they tell you about that idea, you're probably gonna like go with them. Oh Jesus Christ! Um, I was thinking about something else. Mm, events. Um, hold on a second. That's I need to define that a little better. Life events. So let's say you're walking down a street at night and you get robbed, and it's a white person or a black person, right? You're going to think because of that event that those kinds of people are intrinsically bad because of that event that happened to you specifically. Now, that doesn't mean, in actuality, doesn't mean all of them are bad. It just means that because of what happened to you, that event is going to probably jade your mind in a certain way. And then the bottom one here is going to be, oh, one more thing. Sorry. One more thing. Instincts. And maternal instincts. Okay, so we should probably separate these two real quick and just talk about it. So, instincts, that's like when you go into a room and like you go into a bar or something and you see someone that's rowdy, your instincts probably are going to tell you that you don't want to be around that person because that can cause conflict or something like that. Or maybe you are that kind of person, so you like gravitate towards them. That's like instincts. Maternal instincts is like if you're a parent and you see a child in a grocery store with their mom and their mom is scolding them and maybe they smack them in the face or something. Because you're a parent and because you have kids of your own, that is going to elicit some kind of response where you say, I would have treated my child this way, or that's how I would have treated my child. Like whatever they did, you would be like, yes, I agree with what you did, or you disagree because you're a parent and you have your own views on it. Okay, so the bottom one right here, this is going to be things like, um, this is going to be like the thought area. So we're going to say like critical thinking. Um, I had something else. Hold on, just give me a second. I can think of it. Critical thinking, rationalizing, rationalizing. My bad. Not not zin. Rationalizing, um, logic, things like that. that, and then these two, when these two are put together, then you will come up with an answer. So let's see. So let's say like the Google definition brought up um, people coming across the border. So you're going to use traits from this tree and then this tree typically to come up with an answer. Now, that answer is going to vary depending on what kind of person you are and the situations you've been in. Because this right here, I would say this one is probably the most impactful on your reasoning. Um, we'll get into that a little bit later. But just because of like how this has the ability to perhaps jade people in a certain way. As I said, like if you get robbed, that's going to elicit a very strong response from you that emotion by itself cannot. Um, so one of the topics that we talked about was let's see, which one do I want to use? Well, we talked about abortion, so women's rights, and then we talked about transgender athletes in sports. So let's talk about the first one. So let's say you're having a conversation with someone. You're down here, you're saying something, and you've got someone over here, and they're also saying something. So you say you're you're for um, you're for um, abortion, and this person over here is against abortion. So let's dissect this a little bit. So typically, what happens is people, like the person that's for, they will explain. Like the conversation starts. This person says, um, "I think abortion should be allowed because maybe certain things. Maybe they don't even say why. They just say they're for abortion. This person's against abortion. So it comes back to this person. The person that's for abortion is like, why are you against abortion? So the way that comes off in a conversation is this person right here is basically they're not stating it directly, but they're indirectly stating that they um, have the right opinion or the right idea, or they believe themselves to have the right ideology in this situation. And they basically are going to try to convince you that they are right. It's usually how a conversation goes, dealing with topics like this. Not every conversation goes like this, but this is just how it goes. Um, in this instance. So basically, when this person hears that, they're going to get defensive, and they're not going to feel like they necessarily have to give this person an answer, because they're like, well, like why do I have to tell you why? Like, why can't you just respect my opinion? They might get a little standoffish, more defensive, and then the conversation doesn't really work because, as stated yesterday in our topic, well, sorry, in our speech, so it was a group speech. Um, what ended up happening was there was a guy, and he was like talking about we were doing the transgender sports things, and he was talking about his reasons why he thought that transgender people uh, should be allowed in sports that they believe their gender to be. Um, and then there's the other side that didn't agree with him, and it basically turned into this back and forth of um, me as well, like us asking him like why he thought the way he did, um, and it basically turned into this game of us like trying to explain why we were right, or trying to get him to see why he was wrong, um, which isn't how you should go about this, because what we want to be able to do as a society is be able to understand the other person's perspective. We don't necessarily have to agree with them. They could say something fucking batshit insane, but if you understand why they said what they did, then you can get a better understanding of the person, and then you can move forward from there in your topic or whatever you're discussing. So we basically weren't asking the right question. We were saying something that was close to the right answer, but it wasn't necessarily the right thing to say to be able to progress the conversation correctly. Um, and he did give like reasons as to why he believed what he did, and honestly, they were pretty good reasons. And you know, I can't really. Yeah, it shouldn't. The conversation was about who's right or wrong. It's about like understanding what's happening because of these things. So he was more so about like the rationalizing, the logic, the emotion. Basically, he was saying like everyone should be able to participate, um, and things along the lines of that, and that sports um, naturally like is evolving to become like a more competitive, like a better version of itself every day. Which, I mean, if you think about that, I suppose that transgender people being in sports, I can see where he got that from, right? And we had our views, and there was a girl in my group who in high school she had to deal with a transgender person in one of the sports she was in, and she was talking about how when they were in the locker room changing, this person came in, and all the girls felt uncomfortable, um, be- because it was biologically born. It was a guy that was transitioned to a girl. That that's going to elicit a emotional response, a pretty heavy emotional response, because you're putting someone under a lot of duress, because women um, intrinsically are a lot more um, I wouldn't say paranoid, that's the wrong word I'm looking for. A lot more anxious because of events like that, because they feel threatened. Whereas a man in that position, it's like, oh, okay, like I don't feel threatened because I can physically take care of myself. Where a woman, smaller, like obviously because of biological reasons, that's just how it is. A woman's a lot smaller; she can't defend herself as easily. They're not as strong as like a man, right? I mean, obviously, right? But so she pulled more so from the emotion and the life events which transpired to come up with her conclusion. And what we were just saying basically, why do you think this, or like what's your opinion, what's your take really, or like saying things like, how is it fair for someone that's a biological like man to compete with someone that's a biological female, basically is what was going on. And so I wanted to unpack that a little bit and talk about it. Because we need to figure out how to be able to just converse with each other and understand each other, like I was saying a little earlier before I got sidetracked. So I like to think about it as like when you go over to someone's house and they have like an animal, like they have an indoor cat, you're like, oh, hi there. Like that's how I'd act because I'm fucking retarded. That's just how I do it, right? I'm like, oh, hi there. And, I reach down, I like put my hands out, and the cat usually is like, meow, or they just kind of sit there and look at me like I'm a retard. Um, in the wild, like if you see a cat in the woods or a cat in like an alley or like a cat that comes out of a sewer and you try to do that, oh, hi there, they're probably not going to like that too much. They're probably going to like hiss at you and run away and all that shit. So you want to be able to connect with the cat. You need to show them that you're not threatening. You need to like open up to the cat so that they can have trust in you to be able to fully interact with you. And that's the same thing with a conversation, right? Or if you come at someone and you're just like, like why do you think that women should be allowed in, or why do you think transgender people should be allowed in sports? You are basically like, you're opening up with the hi there. You're opening up with the I believe my opinion to be right. Prove me wrong, kind of way, right? Um, so what we want to do is we want to be more open. We want to be like more understanding because like we as people we're just trying to like figure things out, right? Not everyone knows everything. Otherwise, what would be the point of life, right? I mean, what would be the point of living? Because if you do everything, then we're constantly developing as a species. So in this situation, instead of saying why do you think that, what the girl, we'll just use the girl because she like used things that elicited a stronger response. We'll say that I'm the girl in this position, like the girl that talked. Anyways, so let's say that person, because of my um, life, because of a life event which happened to me, I am having a strong emotional response from this topic because it brings up the life event. So I hear what you're saying, but because of how this life event has jaded me in a certain way, I'm not able to understand what you're saying. Could you elaborate a little more on what you're saying? Could you help me understand? Because it's not working for me. So what you do there, you do a couple things there. The first thing you do, which is pretty important as a person, is you put yourself in a place of vulnerability. And what happens when you do that is usually if you're having a conversation like that with the other person, usually if the person isn't an asshole or like fucking, just a horrible, evil person or like very Machiavellic, what's going to happen is this person's going to have like a little introspective moment and they're going to be like, wow, okay, this is something that like affect this person in a particular way. Like, I understand where you're coming from because then you're bringing the bridge together because just by you saying that, this person on the other side has more of an understanding of you and is more so going to tolerate the conversation more as a person. So you're opening up, you're showing yourself that you're not the superior person, that you look like a equal or almost an inferior because of your inability to understand necessarily their perspective or their viewpoint. And that is typically almost always going to lead this person, the against abortion person, into explaining further their idea, their ideas as to why they are against abortion, right? Um, they could say things like, "Well, I'm against abortion because I have a religious belief that um, doesn't let people in my religion Who the fuck texted me? Okay. Anyways, that doesn't let people get abortions because it's against the religion. And I might be like, okay, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Like, I understand now why you have this opinion. Um, and then perhaps in this instance, you might be like, um, you explain to them, well, because of this life event that happened, like let's say you're a parent, right? You're saying that, well, because I'm a father and because I have a wife, if something like that happened to my wife, like let's say a medical complication happened to my wife, right? You can be like, because of that, I had to protect her because the baby would have killed my wife, and the baby would have died in the process, anyways, because there was a medical complication, right? I mean, this happens all the time. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say that. It does not happen all the time. However, it happens enough to make it into um, the news and stuff like that because there's people talking about the Texas. We'll get into that a little bit later. We're not ready for that, or I'm not ready for that, I should say. But basically, I'm just trying to show you like how to become more understanding of the other person in the context of like identity politics, a conversation about it, um, which is which is very important. And we're going to talk about this third thing. Hold on a second. So there's a third category which affects these two directly. Well, I shouldn't say it does. It has the ability to affect these two and misconstrue the answer in a way that isn't exactly what the person believes. And there's a lot of different things that go in this category. So the first thing we're going to talk about is um, politicians. There's some other things that go into this category as well. Um, the government, the government, um, businesses, idols or icons. I feel like I had one more. Let me just think for a little bit. We'll start with that, and then if we need to add to, we will. So for politicians, so let's say um, a politician has the ability to affect these two. Now, you might have your thoughts about politicians. You might be like, oh, well, this person's, an asshole. This person's stupid. This person, these people aren't stupid, right? There are a lot of things, but stupid is not one of them because if they were stupid, they wouldn't be a politician. Um, I'm sure there's some instances where there is a stupid politician, but the exception, we're not going to play the exception as a role here. So let's say for, let's break down Trump a little bit. So Trump is a businessman from New York. Um, his net worth is like $3 billion or so. I believe he lost a lot when he was president the first time. But anyways, for the election, we've got Trump. Um, we should break down the two different political parties first. So libertarians, sorry, that's the wrong one. Democrats, libertarians, are like the middle party, which unfortunately they never win because of things like lobbying, which should be illegal, which it isn't, which is a conversation for another day. But Democrats, they're more so focused on equality and bringing people together, um, gun violence, um, different. Um, Jesus, nonprofit organizations, those kind of things. Typically, that's what Democrats are about. Um, Republicans are um, typically like the logically thinking, more economically driven people. Um, for example, Trump is, as I said, a multi-billion-dollar businessman from New York. Um, so for his presidency, he might say, "Hey, I have these ideas about the economy, like eggs. Let's say eggs fucking have gone up like twice the amount that they were worth before like Joe Biden got in office. We'll say. I don't know if that's true, but like for argument's sake, we'll just talk about that. And he's going to say, hey, the inflation rate is like ridiculously crazy, and APRs for houses are like 5 or 6%. Which, if it's like 6%, that's if you get a loan for a house and it's 6%, that's double what the house is actually worth. I feel like that's another problem as like people of a society that we don't see is that you're giving this money to something that isn't even there. Um, but for the argument's sake, Trump is basically saying that he has all these plans and these ideas because he uses his knowledge from the business world and he puts his perspective onto these problems, and this is how he's able to deal with them. So people are probably going to vote for him based on those kind of things. They want, he wants inflation to come down. He wants to bring the cost of things down. He wants to boost the economy. Get better job circulation. Those kinds of things is typically what he's going to focus on. And then people are going to use like critical thinking, rationalizing, logic, those kind of stuff. Let's put reason here as well. Okay. Um, this is like a social dynamic more so than politics. This is typically going to be like where most men reside. That's how they figure out their answers. Are of course going to use some of the things up here as well, but like as a as like a guy, they're going to think more so about the critical thinking, the rationalizing, the logic reasoning, just because that's how people are. There's not. It's not to say that that's right or wrong. That's just how people are. It's like white people, right? I'm white. My fucking god, sometimes we do things that are absolutely batshit insane to me. We'll take a fucking um, we'll take a circle, turn it into a long circle basically. We'll put cars on it, and you turn left about 3,000 fucking times. Like holy shit, that's the most boring thing in the world. Or like people like mayonnaise. Whoa, the mayonnaise! Someone turned up the fucking heat in this room. I'll tell you what. And it's like mayonnaise because white people can't handle spice. Or The Office, right? White people like The Office because they can relate to it more, right? And it's just how it is. Of course, there's black people in The Office as well as like Oscar. He's a Latino guy. He's gay. Whatever the whole like. There's a whole different kind of office dynamic because that takes in a lot of different kind of people. Just like with rapping, like typically rappers are black people as a majority. And, as I said, there's nothing right or wrong about it. That's just how it is, right? I mean, of course, you've got your white rappers. You've got like Eminem, Logic. You've got Lil Dicky, fucking Lil Peep before he died, Lil Xan. Post Malone used to rap. He doesn't really do it anymore. There are some white people, but generally, you've got your fucking, your 50 Cents, your Kanyes. You've got your Kid Cuddies, your The Weekends, Ski Mask, the Slump God, Lil Mosey. You've got Trippie Redd, Lil Uzi. These are some people that I listen to. Of course, that's not all of the people. That's just the people that I can think of right now. Um, so, back to what I was saying. Women typically are in this top um, category here. Um, so, like, women typically are more emotional. That's just how it is, and there's nothing wrong with that. Um, their maternal instincts are going to be a lot stronger than guys because they're a lot more anxious to begin with. So when they're put under duress, they're going to be a lot more worked up than a guy is, right? The religion, I these don't really tie in necessarily with women specifically. It's the way that these turn a conversation in a certain way where it's hard to be able to turn someone back because religion is such like a strong response force in a person. It's kind of like the you cannot rationalize a person out of a position they did not rationalize themselves into or reason themselves into. Um, which is what these politicians take advantage of. Whereas, like Kamala Harris, she has certain opinions about the border, where she wants more people to come over because she's like half black, half fucking Indian. I think is what she is. Um, and so maybe she uses her life experiences to say, "Hey, I understand where you're coming from, right? Like if I was in a country that was run by a corrupt government where the cartel was killing people and selling, your daughters into like, sex trafficking, and there was constantly war and famine. These people are probably, I'm going to say, they're going to bring their families and themselves over to America because it's a much safer place to be, right? Just it's the same thing about her and abortion. She thinks that you should be able to get an abortion most of the time. Is basically I'm sure she has some actual views on it, but her as a politician, she sees how this elicits a emotional response for people, and she captivates that, and she uses it as a weapon in her game. Basically, the same thing with Trump, where he's being logical. Of course, he's not going to implement everything, but he thinks these sound like good, rational, sound ideas, which gets the men being like, okay, we can reside with Trump because of these things, and this basically turns into a game of, well, my politician said this, so it must be true, or that means your politician is evil. Um, like when Donald Trump says crooked Joe, that elicits a response from people. Whether that's good or bad, that's dependent on who you are as a person. But I just want to make sure my sound's still working. Okay, we're still good. So that's how politicians they weaponize these things down here, which elicit some kind of response in order to change this answer. Because typically, what's going to happen is people are going to be more so in the middle ground. They're going to use um, skills from both these trees to come to a conclusion that is sound to them as a person, that brings in like multiple perspectives and like trying to understand, because as a person you try to understand people. um and unfortunately we don't always get the most sound like political candidates to vote for. Like I wish Bernie Sanders would have been a political candidate, because if I could have got to hear him talk and explain himself more, then I feel like he could have got a lot more of the votes and he would have probably won. I genuinely believe that if it would have been Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, Bernie would have actually won. Because I don't know too much about Bernie, so if I'm wrong here, just let me know in the comment section. People love to let other people know when they're wrong, so if that's me, just let me know. But I do believe whenever he was younger, he like actually rallied for change. He's much older now. He's much more, frail, so he's not out in the streets rallying. But he is a person when the time comes and like a call is put out, he responds. Whereas with these other people like Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, that can be put into question because what have they done, to really affect the causes that they believe in? Not saying that they haven't, um, but I think with like Bernie's instance, a Bernie's situation, I think that is probably pretty strong for him. But you can kind of see what I'm saying with politicians. It's the same thing with idols. So there's like left leaning idols, there's right leaning idols, sometimes there's people in the middle. These are people that you look up to that have, they've maybe done something in their life or with their career that you see as very commendable and you view them in a certain like light. For instance, I like Jordan Peterson And Joe Rogan. There's also other people like, um, we were talking about rappers earlier. You've got Cardi B, you've got Kanye, you've got Taylor Swift. Oh my goodness, so many people love Taylor Swift. And politicians can sometimes use these people as stepping stools to get to the answer of, you should vote for me as president because look at this person, they support me, so you should support me. Or that's not necessarily true. You shouldn't, have an opinion just based off of because someone is supporting someone else. You should look at why are they supporting someone else. Is there a conflict of interest here? Um, how is this person usually in a situation like this? How do they act? Is there, a financial end here somewhere? Like Kamala Harris's um, campaign, they spent over $1 billion. Well, sorry, they got over $1 billion of funding, and half of that, over half of that actually, I think it was like $512 million, went to paying for people in her campaign. So like Cardi B got up on stage, Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris. I'm sure that was not cheap. I guarantee you, because of the reach that Taylor Swift has, that was not cheap. The same thing with the Cardi B, or whoever the female black rapper was up on stage. I believe it was Cardi B. If I'm wrong, again, let me know. Um, but typically, um, these idols, they can be good. They're more open with their ideals as long as it doesn't cause too much scrutiny for them. So, like, let's see. Like a sponsor, like if someone on YouTube that you watch gets a sponsor, they're going to be talking good about a product. Um, if it's something that they use, like if they're a gamer and they play video games and they use, hold on a second, if they use control freaks, like I have a control freak on here, let's say, um, I of course I'm not going to get any sponsors, but if I got a sponsor from Control Freak, I'm going to talk about them because I have experience with Control Freaks because I've been using them for like 6 years and I love them. Now, there are some ads where you can see, okay, this person doesn't actually use this. Um, like some people promote, let's see, Ridge wallets. People love to promote Ridge wallets, or the lawnmower, which is like some kind of razor. And they probably don't use it, right? I mean, there's a chance that they do. I'm not saying they don't necessarily, but because of their content, you can typically tell, okay, was this a cash grab where they're just doing the sponsorship because they're getting offered an exuberant amount of money? Or are they doing a sponsorship because they genuinely believe something is good, right? Um, Things like that. Where, some people will have Starforge, which is the group of online folks that started a computer company. Asmongold, Ms. Kiff, I think it was Ms. Kiff. I might be wrong here, so I don't know all the people that are involved in that company. So I believe Asmongold, he took a step back after his fucking his goddamn Hamas rant that he went on. Well played to him, fucking buffoon. But there's things like that where you see someone that has Starforge. They have like the little Starforge icon. It's like sponsored by Starforge, and they've got a Starforge computer, and they've been using it for 4 fucking years. They're like, well, they actually believe in this product, right? You can see what I'm kind of saying. But then there's people that are more so in the middle. They're not like leaning in terms of profit or in terms of like political beliefs. There's people like Joe Rogan. Now, I don't agree with everything Joe Rogan says, but I think my perspective of Joe Rogan is this is a guy who is just trying to understand more about the world. Like he'll bring people on like Neil deGrasse Tyson. He'll bring people on like Mike Baker, like John Maphee. He'll bring people on like fucking Donald Trump, right? He'll bring like all kinds of people on, like Forrest Grant. Love that guy, but Forrest Grant. He'll bring other people on, like Jordan Peterson. People that are professionals in some sort of part in their life. Or sometimes he'll bring on comedians because he's a comedian himself, or he'll bring on, uh, professional MMA people because he commentates for the UFC because he knows Dana White, because he's really involved in MMA and fucking boxing and all that kind of stuff because he works out and he's very physical and stuff like that, right? He's just a guy that he wants to know things. He wants to have a better understanding of the world, I should say. So I would say that that is someone that I lean towards because they're more so in the middle. They don't really lean a particular political way. Now, because of, oh, perfect. That's such a good thing that I brought that up because we're forgetting about a different one, which is legacy media. Now, something that happened with Joe Rogan and legacy media is back when COVID-19 was happening. He took this thing called ivermectin, which um, legacy media ran with as horse dewormer. Now, it's not primarily used for that. Its actual target isn't even for that. I don't know what it is. Sorry. But I know that legacy media ran with that story because of how that comes off. So let's say you're listening to legacy media. You've listened to them for 20 fucking years. You trust them. You hear them say, Joe Rogan is taking horse dewormer. And you're like, that's crazy. That's what a crazy person would do. Joe Rogan is a crazy person, right? You can see how someone would make that logical leap without looking further into it. So because of that, um, and they messed with the saturation on the picture that he took to make him look um, more sickly than he actually was. Um, so because of that, Joe Rogan got pushed towards the right more so now because he took that life event and he's like, okay, fuckers, I see you out here trying to um, you know uh, starts with trying to defamate my image as like a person and as like a thinker, so I'm going to lean more towards the right because they're more accepting. You can see that kind of logical action that Joe Rogan would take because of this life event, right? So um someone else, like I listen to Jordan Peterson, he's going through a lawsuit with Canada, which he's been going for like the past 2 or 3 fucking years, right? Over comments that he's made about transgender people, right? Um, and the 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 board of psychological like psychologists, I think that's what it is in Canada, is basically coming after him and trying to take away his license because of these things that he said. Because as a psychologist, you're not allowed to have a public opinion about like a political topic because of the discourse that it can cause in Canada. I think that's kind of what they're trying to get at. If that's their laws, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not too sure. And I don't live in Canada. We live in the land of bald eagles per fucking M1 Abram tanks, right? We be living in the land of the free, where you can kind of say whatever the fuck you want and you can get away with it, basically. It's kind of like the wild, wild west of the world. There's also other idols that kind of lean into politics. Like, for instance, Elon Musk. Elon Musk bought X, well, bought Twitter back when it was Twitter, and he has turned it into X. And there was some oppression. There was some suppression of information on X. Like I was talking about the COVID-19 with Joe Rogan. Um, there was the thing with like doctors that had like factual information because they are specialists in their field talking about COVID 19, and it's not um, like as dangerous as people say, and the vaccine isn't properly tested and all that stuff, which I believe the vaccine was created in 11 months, and typically for a vaccine to pass trials, it takes 7 fucking years. So, despite what you may think about, the COVID thing, there's obviously something going on there that doesn't make any fucking sense, right? Because how can you pass a vaccine when it typically takes 7 years and 11 months? Doesn't make any fucking sense. But he basically saw it as there was like disinformation being pushed and there was like factual information that was being suppressed on Twitter The same thing with like the Hunter Biden laptop story. Um, there was that whole thing that was being suppressed because Hunter Biden had like I guess drugs and like hookers and like he had an illegal firearm. I believe that's what it was. Again, I don't know everything, so if I messed up, I apologize. Um, but people can look towards Elon Musk kind of as like a sign of like, okay, he. Oh Jesus, I don't know why the fuck I clicked on that. My bad. Um, he thinks certainly about uh, political topics, then I'm going to agree with him because I like him. Where you shouldn't necessarily do that because people can be, people are corruptible. There's, what I'm trying to get is people are corruptible. Idols are corruptible. They're just like politicians. Not necessarily because what they're doing, maybe like they're a fucking movie star or they make YouTube videos on like historical things, they're not everyone's a politician. You know, they have notoriety like a politician, but they don't necessarily act the same way that a politician does, right? Because there's things like lobbying where politicians are supposed to be. So the things up here, up on the top level, would not be an issue if there was not financial corruptibility. Um, uh, because that typically, financial corruptibility and greed, whether that's in financial or power, right? Those are typically the two main indicators of greed is finances and power. That's typically what drives people that are greedy. I'm sure there's some other things like religion. They believe they're doing something good for religion, or they believe that they're like cleaning up the world, which, like, Hitler, for instance, he thought he was doing a good thing, but Hitler also was in World War One. He had PTSD and he was on drugs. Now I'm sure there's drugs that like make you a calmer person and you're more like, understanding of other people. You're more inclusive. But I'm sure when you're on fucking cocaine, you're not exactly the most sound person in the world, right? Which Hitler was. And he was on some other things. Like they gave the Nazis meth. I'm sure when you're on fucking meth, you're not exactly a very nice person. Um, but he was able to infiltrate the people down here, the people that come to answers because of these two things, um, because he was such a good speaker. And we need to be wary of that as a society, that there are people that are well versed in articulation and commentation, but they're not actually good people. Hitler, he was a bad guy. Almost everybody in the history of the world that did a bad thing thought they were doing a good thing, but they were jaded in some way which made them unable to see their own jadedness. Like I said, he was in World War One. He had PTSD, and he had the drug problem. So those probably attributed to his ideas as a leader. I mean, he was a leader. He was a horrible leader, but he was a leader, um, nonetheless. But people like that are the reason that these things up here fall apart. If we lived in a perfect world where everyone was, they took these into account and they were able to understand each other, we wouldn't need to worry about that. But these things up here can be corruptible, and they are very, very good at taking advantage, whether that be through eliciting responses because of emotion, religion, tradition, life, all that shit of critical thinking, or because of financially, because they're like a bully and they want to attain power through whatever they see as power. So that's why we have such a problem up here, and how they affect these two things, and we need to be wary of that. You know, like I say, like I like Jordan Peterson, but because of his lawsuit, maybe that makes him jaded in a certain way towards government. And while I might be like, oh, I can agree with him on some instances, sometimes I need to look a little deeper. I need to take a step back and I need to think, am I agreeing with this? Am I agreeing with him because I agree with him? Because I think this is like a sound idea as a person to have, or am I agreeing with him because he's Jordan Peterson? You know what I'm saying? And he is typically a very, very smart, rational thinker, which is why I gravitate towards him so much. But, he does get things wrong too. So we'll move on to the next one, which is government. Now, this can be things like just a government branch, a certain part of government, a certain part of legislation, or this might be the government overall, like the military industrial complex part of the government. I think that we spend an absurd fucking amount of money on the military industrial complex. I understand that we have a lot of facilities, we have a lot of weapons, we have a lot of technology, we've got a lot of people. I used to work for the government. I fucking know, right? Um, but I don't think it's all just. There was a Congress meeting that happened, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and they were talking about the prices that Lockheed Martin charges because the government works with contractors to help out um, fuel the government's whatever it is it's trying to do. Lockheed Martin is one of those contractors, and they create weapons technology and flying vehicles for the military. It's basically what they do. Um, Lockheed Martin charged, I think it was $800 for a bag of bolts. Like, hold on, like a bag of bolts that could fit in my fucking beanie, right? It's not a deep beanie by any means. It's a bit stretched, but a bag of bolts for one of the aircraft that they were working on, the F-35 or something like that. Um, $800 for that. If you see that in the store, you're gonna be like, these people are out of their fucking minds. But because it's the government, they just kind of throw money at things, and Lockheed Martin's allowed to get away with it. So I think that's an instance where we shouldn't be spending so much money. Like that bag of bolts obviously is not $800 fucking, but because of the context of the bolts, like the prices of water around the world, if you go into a store, water's gonna be like, I don't know, $4 a case. It's like 24 bottles. If you go to a restaurant, and they just have bottled water might be $1.25 for just one bottle. If you go to a concert, bottled water might be $7 fucking. If you're in the middle of a desert, bottled water is going to be very, very expensive because of the context of where you're asking for the bottled water, right? And the supply that is available. Um, so there are some things like that with the government that I do not agree with. Um, and the government can use its power to outreach its citizens, and the citizens don't really become aware of it until it's too late. Like, for instance, whenever 9/11 happened, um, they implemented the Patriot Act, which was like bringing back the country to what it was, making the country safer, basically, so that 9/11 couldn't happen again. What ended up happening is I read Edward Snowden's book, Permanent Record, and I found some very fascinating things in there. Um, what happened when they passed the Patriot Act is Congress gave the ability of the government to spy on its citizens, and Edward Snowden found out about this whenever he was stationed in Hawaii and he was working at the base there. He wasn't in the army. He was just like someone that was in like the security sector, and he knew a lot about computers. So he found this out by complete fucking accident, and he found out that you could find someone's entire like online profile based off of this. Um, I'm not very tech savvy, so I am definitely going to get some things wrong that I'm about to say. So I apologize for that. So it was like the system that was able to compile data of a person and their online print, um, and you were able to like make a profile, and you were able to see what they said to other people, maybe like the text messages they sent, the things they looked up on their computer. their banking information, like if they put that on a fucking website and they like a payment portal, right? They're able to see all of that stuff. And that's fucking, Edward Snowden believed that was terrifying as a person that was he was a very patriotic person. So what he did was he compiled all this information. He flew to, I believe it was Hong Kong or Tokyo. No, I don't think it was Tokyo. Shanghai. I think it was in Shanghai. That's where he went to. And he, released all that information to some American reporters. And, um, it was a hell of a thing. I think I was 9 at the time when that happened. That happened in 2011, 2012. I think that was 2012. Um, so I didn't really understand it, but the media basically painted him as this like spy for Russia and whatever not. But this what I was trying to say is this whole thing happened because the government overreached what it was allowed to do. Right? There was like a small group of people that had created this like machine that was able to do all of this. Um, so that's how government can influence things. Another way that government can influence that is like I was talking about abortion. So the government has certain laws, like in certain states there's like the United States government, and then there's like the Pennsylvania state government or the Texas state government or the Washington state government, right? There's all these different state governments because there's 50 states in America, right? Um, and different states have different laws towards abortion based on what they believe and what they think is, you know, a rational thing to have in their state doctrine on abortion. Now, um, people get this confused with, like, for instance, in Texas, um, people say that, my wife was going to labor, there was some medical complications, and um, or like my wife was far along in the pregnancy and she was having complications like medical complications, and like the baby was dead or it was going to die and it was going to threaten her life, and because of the state's laws we were not able to get an abortion in Texas. We had to go somewhere else, or my wife died or something like that. So the government has fail-safe law implements where if the pregnancy is medically threatening a woman's life, you are that proceeds any kind of state law that is set, where you are legally allowed to get an abortion in whatever state you're in because of that, because the federal government is higher than the state government. So let's say in Texas, you're not allowed to get an abortion for any circumstance. Well, you know, if your wife's life is being threatened because of um, the abortion, sorry, Jesus Christ, I'm fumbling my words right now, because of a medical complication, you are allowed to get that surgery, that abortion, to save your wife's life because the federal government precedes the state government. Now, some things that get confused in this discussion are people not being able to separate bad people doing bad things and government. So, like, for this, saying that I wasn't able to get an abortion in the state of Texas because, um, the state wouldn't allow it. So, something that people do not bring into account when talking about a situation like this is the laws that are implemented, um, where if a doctor gives the opportunity to a family to have an abortion in a state like, let's say, Texas, for instance, then they will lose their medical license and they are never allowed to practice medicine ever again. Now, if we're looking at the perspective of the doctor, we can look at it two different ways. Whereas the doctor maybe they've got a family to feed, they've got a wife and kids to think about financially, and they're like the breadwinner of the family. If you're a doctor, I would assume that there's probably not too many other jobs that can, exceed the financial gains from, being a doctor. If you're paying off your student debt as a doctor, because my sister's going to go through medical school next year, and she is going to have a lot of student debt because of that. Um, there is the threat of losing your medical license, right? If you've been practicing medicine for, let's say, 15 years, you're like 40 years old, you can't just switch into another career at this point, right? Or it's going to be very hard for you to do so at the very least. So they are going to have to make the call based on those factors if they want to proceed with the abortion or not. Something else to consider, however, is what is the right or wrong thing to do in this instance? What is the not right or wrong thing necessarily, but the best thing to do? And that's concerning the law, that's concerning the doctor, and that's concerning the the family in question, right? Um, and typically, people are going to lean with, well, the doctor should just make the call and have the surgery as like the morally correct thing because you are saving a life in doing so. Whereas if you do not have the surgery, that person has a 100% death rate in the instance that we're talking about with medical complications with a fetus. Um, but when talking about this issue, people get the government mixed up and the person mixed up because government people see this as the state government regulated that they're not allowed to have an abortion, so that's on the government. However, the conversation should be around the doctor in question because really it's up to them what happens in this situation, right? It shouldn't be. It should be about um, the person. We as a society have a hard time disconnecting the business or the machine or the political identity from the person, right? So, um, we'll get into that a little bit later. But what I was basically trying to say is there's a lot more depth to this issue than what people are leading on because they want to try to make it simple because this is a complex matter and not everyone is going to understand a complex matter. Um, like when talking about abortion, Kamala Harris is going to say, oh, this state banned abortion and people are dying. That's going to be a lot easier for a larger populace to understand than saying, well, the state has a ban on abortion. However, the United States government proceeds the state's ability because they have a law that states that if there is, a complication in a pregnancy and it threatens the woman's life, then they're allowed to have an abortion. However, because of the doctor in question, they're put up to what's the morally correct thing to do for them, even though their medical license is being threatened, even though they might have a family to feed, even though they have student debt, even though they're older and they can't just switch jobs. Like that's a much more complex issue to unpack than the first one going with be like, oh, state banned abortion, state bad, right? I think we all can see that. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Businesses. So businesses have a couple different ways at affecting people. You have businesses that are advertising to people. So depending on their advertisement models, what they say affects people's perspectives of their that affects the perspective of the company. So like tricks are for kids, right? You've got the rabbit on the screen and, kids like the rabbit, so they're going to like tricks. Frosted Flakes, there's a tiger. He says they're great, and that's going to elicit some kind of response for people. It's the same thing as me saying Red Robin. I know one of you motherfuckers said yum. Um, gotcha. Things like that elicits a response from a person. Whether that's good or bad, that's subjective on the person. But typically, those are all good things, right? Um, there's something else where businesses so we're not going to talk about like the morality of the business just yet. We're going to talk about like things that the business does. So the business can put things like high fructose corn syrup in, let's say, cereal, right? We're talking about cereal. They put it in cereal. And what that basically does is it's a chemical that is typically found in berries, that berries eat these berries because they allow them to eat more. They make them hungrier even though they're not necessarily hungry. So if you have high fructose corn syrup inside of cereal, um, you're going to want to eat more than what you're going to typically eat if there was not high fructose corn syrup in there. Now, high fructose corn syrup doesn't naturally come in nature, it's just regular fructose. So if it's high fructose, that brings into question how much more effective is it. I'm not too sure. Um, Maybe someone out there has done a study or could do a study. I don't know if any studies exist based on that particular instance, but they could. I'm not saying they can't. They could. I just don't know about them. Um, so those are things that businesses can implement to affect a person's perspective on their food. It's like Papa John's. Goddamn, Papa John's. I think it's so good. Um, I'll usually get it on Fridays, and I'll eat the whole fucking pizza. I will eat the whole fucking pizza, and I love that goddamn thing. Um, Typically, I'll eat half of it at night, and then the other half is going to be like Saturday morning. But better ingredients, better pizza, Papa John's, baby, right? Because of my emotion towards Papa John's, because of life events, um, I have a bias towards Papa John's as a person because of my identity, right? Same thing with business. Businesses implement these practices which affect person's identity, um, on a topic. Now, other things that can affect people are the price of certain goods or certain needs. Like, for instance, let's talk about life insurance. There was something that happened last week which majorly affected the media and people's online presence. There was a gentleman that shot someone else in New York. Now, that happens a lot, more than it should, and while it is sad, it does happen quite a lot. So you might be wondering, well, why is that so important? Well, the people in question was the person who got shot, which was the insurance CEO of United Healthcare, which is a health insurance company. Now, you might be like, well, why does that fucking matter, right? Why does it matter who it was? People get shot all the time. It's because of the effect that things like healthcare have on us as people. So, one of the major factors in people's response to this is going to be, um, how much money they make as a person, because healthcare, it's not cheap. I know it's not cheap. I don't know how much it is. That's dependent on the company itself, but I know that it's not cheap. Now, there are two different classes out of the three that are not affected by healthcare. The first one is going to be lower income folks that are within like welfare range. I don't know exactly what the range is, but if you make under a certain amount of money, per month or per year, then you are eligible to government funded health programs which take care of your health insurance. So those people don't necessarily have to worry about healthcare because they are eligible for Medicare or Medicaid or whatever the government funded program is. The other class that is not affected is the high class. And the reason for that is because, let's say, an insurance company So let's say you break your knee or your foot, and you go to the hospital, and you're like, I need to have surgery so that my knee or foot is better because it's like hanging at an angle. Your bones aren't going to um, heal correctly, right? Um, you file a claim to your insurance, and then if they approve that, then you pay the deductible. It's like $100 or whatever, and then they take care of the rest of the medical expenses. What ends up happening sometimes is medical companies will deny medical insurance to people because of various reasons. Um, Sometimes it's because of how people filled out a form and they're being fucking assholes, or I'm sure there's other instances. I just can't think of them because I don't know. I'm not well versed in that topic. So someone can let me know in the comments. And those people, while they are like, wow, that is irritating. That fucking insurance company sucks. I'm going to switch insurance companies, but I'm just going to pay for the medical expenses anyways because they're in the high class and they can financially afford it. Most people in America are in the middle class, whether that's the low end middle class up to the high end middle class or in just like the middle of the middle class, right? Those are the people where they get medical insurance. If something happens, like they break their foot, they break their leg, to go in, they file a claim, they get denied. That can severely fuck their life up. Severely. My dad, at the time that my parents were going through a divorce, he got a surgery, and the surgery went wrong, and he almost bled to death. Um, and he needed to get life flighted with a helicopter from the the hospital that we were at to Pittsburgh, which is like where the trauma center was. That flight was 18,000 fucking dollars. If they would have denied his medical, um, if the medical company would have denied that insurance claim, he would have had to pay for that out of pocket, and he might have gone bankrupt. Because he was selling his house. Well, he wasn't selling his house. He was like remortgaging the house, um, and all that stuff that was going on. Where that would have had a severe, severe impact on his life. Not necessarily because he did anything wrong, but because the medical company didn't want to pay for his fucking bills, right? Um, Now, something to keep in mind when we're talking about this: the medical companies in America are for profit, whereas people see that they should be for people. Now, what I mean by that is the medical companies that are in Canada, let's say. Canada has free healthcare. Now, you have to pay more into taxes, and that's how they get free healthcare, but I'm pretty sure everyone in America would be open to the discussion of paying more in taxes if we get free healthcare, because then we have that security, right? Whereas a government is less likely to deny your fucking medical claims than a company that is for profit, right? Now, if you're a political opponent, I could see how that would be a problem, because if you're a political opponent of the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, or whatever the fuck his name is, um, and you're trying to like file a medical claim and the government denies it, well, that would be a very unfortunate fucking instance to occur. But I would say that if you're a political opponent of Justin Trudeau and you're under the government's radar, you probably have enough money to be able to um, cover that. So that's something to bring into account. Um, but this is why it's such like a divisive thing, because the majority of Americans are in the middle class, and insurance is it affects the middle class the most because of what I just said. Um, and if you take someone that's like in the lower end of the middle class and you hit them with a massive fucking medical bill and they're like barely hanging on to begin with in the middle class, they're going to just fucking avalanche down a hill. And um, there's a lot of people where there's So with United Healthcare, 32% of claims get denied that go through United Healthcare. I believe was the statistics. I might be right. Might be wrong on that, but that's what's been going around the internet. It's around 32%. So you have to assume that out of the 32%, there's probably a couple instances where there was a middle class person, they got hit with a massive fucking medical bill and they weren't able to pay it, and they probably went bankrupt, or they weren't able to have the surgery and they fucking died because their insurance company denied their claim. So we start to see how the gears are turning in people's heads, and then this instance of the CEO of this massive fucking health insurance company dies, and he gets shot, and typically in society, when someone dies, that's a very horrible thing. Especially when someone's murdered, that is a massively horrible thing. And so, typically you're going to see a lot of people that are sending their best prayers and their wishes, things like that, their condolences, their apologies, things of that nature to the family that is affected by this. However, in this particular instance, there are people that are exonerating the murderer and applauding what he did and seeing him as a hero. Now, I just want to say that I know YouTube has some um, rules about promoting violence, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to talk about what happened, right? Um, and it's such an interesting aspect because at, you know on one side of the argument, this is a person that was a father who had a wife who had a loving family, and if you woke up one day and you were this person's wife or kid, and you saw that your dad got fucking murdered, you would be an absolute mess for probably the rest of your life. That is like a horrible thing to have happen, and people are celebrating this, and you see that, and you're probably just mortified because you know that was a loving person, because you've been married to them and you've stuck with them for so long, and you've been with them through the ups and downs, and you had love for them. um and as a society, we tend to get worked up over issues like this, where we should be able to break down these complex issues and talk about them more normally as people. Because what we need to do in this particular instance is we need to separate the man from the machine, separate the man from the business, separate the man from the identity. Because what we're really asking here is, was it the person that was evil, or was it the business that was evil? Now, you might say that he was a CEO, so of course he was an evil person, right? Because he ran the business. I can see how someone would have that kind of logic. But because it is a for profit organization, its entire purpose as a machine is to create as much revenue as possible. And there are shareholders and investors, and there's a whole board of representatives, people that like represent the company, that vote on topics of discussion for this company, and they have the say so. The CEO is like the president, but we have checks and balances where the board is like the House, and the shareholders are like the Senate, or the shareholders are like the Supreme Justice, um, the Supreme Justices, right? We have checks and balances. Um, but because it is a for-profit organization, the shareholders, they don't give a fuck what happens. They want number to go up. So the board members are going to keep their positions by saying that they want number to go up. And the CEO is probably like, well, I won't be CEO if I don't want number to go up. So I want number to go up, right? I mean, we can kind of see how that unfolds. Um, so in this instance, we should be focusing our energy on United Healthcare as a business, not United Healthcare as the CEO died. We should celebrate his death. Um, that's absurd. But I can see how people have that opinion. I can see that. And something else is this guy was arrested in Altoona, which is very, very close to where I live. It's about 2 minutes away. I live in Hollidaysburg right now for school. Um, but he was arrested at a McDonald's in Altoona, and you know, he got arrested, and typically it's like, okay, the bad person was caught, but people online were like review bombing the McDonald's and saying there's rats in the kitchen, or um, saying that they will give him an alibi. Basically, an alibi is saying that like they were with this person during the time of the murder online. So people see him as like a hero, kind of. Where so we need to break down that person as a person as well. This was a kid. He was like what 26 years old. Um, he had, he was a very like loved person. His family was well off. He went to an Ivy League school. He was the valedictorian of his high school, and he had a very articulate valedictorian speech. As I hear from people online, whether that's true or not, I'm not too sure. That's just what I understand. And on one of his, I think he used Facebook was the thing. He had a picture of pins in someone's back. Obviously, that was of his back because he had a spinal surgery, and that majorly affected him as a person. When you have back pain on a chronic level, to where you have to get surgery at 26 for it, your back is severely fucked. You have some kind of scoliosis, or you have some kind of chronic back pain that isn't typical. Um, so we could say that maybe he had that surgery. Maybe his medical company didn't cover the expenses, or because he's 26, he just got kicked off his parents' medical insurance, and he had to pay for it himself. There's like multiple things that could happen, right? But what I'm saying is that guy, I can understand why he felt like he was driven to do something. However, I don't think that he chose the right thing to do. I think what he should have done, instead of killing the CEO, which that's a wild thing to do, he should have shifted his gaze onto United Healthcare, the business, right? Because that's ultimately your goal is to make the business better, right? If it's like if you kill a cockroach in your house, right? Well, if you just kill one, the problem's not going to go away. You want to call an exterminator. The exterminator in this position is United Healthcare as a whole. Maybe you talk to the federal government about why you think healthcare should be less expensive. Um, it's kind of like insulin. Like there's this whole thing that goes on with insulin and the price of insulin, because there's a lot of people that are diabetic in America. 21% of people in America die every year from heart disease. So there's a lot of fucking people in America that are diabetic, and they need insulin to survive. And there's always the ongoing battle between the price of insulin and what the government regulates. So I think that he should have brought that up to the government, like the price of medical insurance, and how maybe like you don't really use it that much in your lifetime, like the typical person doesn't use it that much in their lifetime, and how whenever you do use it, you have the unfortunate instance where you can run into not being able to get the surgery because the medical company denies your health care. I think like we should shift our gaze as a society towards that, instead of talking about we're happy that someone died, which is a horrible fucking thing to do because they're a person at the end of the day. It's kind of like this little scenario that I fucking drew down here, right? Let's say you're for abortion. Let's say you're against abortion. Instead of like trying to understand this person, you just pull out a fucking gun and shoot them. Well, that's not what you do, obviously, right? Like, come on now, let's let's lock in a bit. Um, it's just such a like a sad instance, because we could be using this time to let the family mourn over, the person that died, and we as a country could be trying to strive to better healthcare in this instance, because we could say, look at what happened to this young kid that got a back surgery, and the rest of his life is going to be ruined now because of what he did, because of like the pain that was caused, or maybe what happened with the medical company. Like we need to talk about the medical company as a whole and not just the CEO dying, right? I think we all could, potentially agree with that topic. I mean, maybe you would say it differently than I would, but I think we can agree with the premise that, there's something wrong with the medical industry in America, and we need to face it. Um, the last thing that I wanted to talk about was legacy media and how it affects these two. So I brought up the Joe Rogan thing earlier. So I know of a person that lives close to my mother now that he was in a very very high position in the country, and he was in charge of something that was extremely important. And I talked to him about a lot of things. Um, and one of the things I talked to him about last time when I went to see him was the legacy media and the election. And what he brought up is he doesn't know if he can trust the legacy media anymore because they've been like slipping. Now he is a very intelligible person. He's a very rational person. He's a very aware person. So although it took him quite a while to realize it, he did come to the conclusion that the legacy media isn't necessarily like truth media. Legacy media is now in the hands, well, it's really always been in the hands of whoever controls the political power of the country. So back during the Cold War era, the Republicans actually had more power over the country than the Democrats did. And then after the Soviet Union collapsed, then it swung into the um, Republicans' hands for a little while. Sorry, the Democrats. My bad, because we didn't have that like threat of war and like immediate death, and all that stuff, all the way that that affects, because there was the whole thing with World War II, and we got to support our troops, we got to do this, we got to do that to beat the Nazis, the evil Nazis, and then it turned into we have to support the troops, we have to do this and that to support the evil communists, and there was the whole thing with the space race and all of that stuff that happened, the Bay of Pigs with Cuba, JFK, all that stuff happened, and the control was within the Republican Party, and that's who controlled the legacy media, and then it swung into the hands of like the Democrat Party, and now the I would say the legacy media typically is controlled by Democrat forces. You do have Fox News, which is more so um, a Republican-leaning news station. I think they're all fucking stupid because they're like it's very obvious that they have a political bias, yet they push the idea that they're like neutral and they're just reporting on the news because that's what they should be reporting on is the news, where they're reporting on opinions and opinionated versions of a news story. Like they talk about, let's say, um, January 6th. We talk about January 6th a lot and how that was like a threat to democracy, even though Donald Trump, told them, not to go there. And, he asked the New York governor, I believe it was, for, or he offered them, military protection and they denied it. Um, and they talk about how horrible Trump is for all of that. But then we have like George Floyd happen, and um, fucking people went to Washington and proceeded to just like claim a version of Seattle as their own, as like a free city. And that happened for like what, a fucking week, until they realized how stupid and moronic that was. Um, and then they burned down like billions of dollars of buildings, and they stole. And no one really talks about the, you know, how bad that was, because it was like for George Floyd, even though George Floyd, he was a felon to begin with, it was a horrible thing that he died, but he wasn't this like perfect person. There was like some flaws with him. There was some pretty big flaws with him, um, and that's something that legacy media didn't really push because they have a certain agenda. Whoever the top paying person is, they listen to that person because that's the person that funds their company, right? It's kind of like if you go to your work, you don't want to piss your boss off because your boss is probably going to fucking fire you, right? So you want to play nice with your boss. You want to try to be, friendly, stuff like that. Ooh, that brings up businesses, but we'll focus on legacy media um, for right now. But you can kind of see how legacy media has, become a little more political. I'm sure it's always been political, but you can kind of see the pendulum swinging in the way of the Democrats because most of the news stations are against Trump, and that's fine if that's how they want to play it. Um, but I think media should be more about the truth and the news, and not so much about like opinions and warping identities. Like I said with Joe Rogan, they took a truth that he was taking ivermectin, and instead of saying like this is everything that it treats, they focused on the horse dewormer part, which isn't even like a big part of what it's actually used for. Um, so there's that. One thing I wanted to harp on business with, which is like understanding people. So I used to work at Best Buy after I got out of the military. I got out like last November, and I didn't go to school until this end of August. So I, got a job with Best Buy in like February-ish, um, and I worked there. Let's see, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. So I worked there for like 7 months, about six or 7 months, about. And they had certain things because they're a for-profit organization that they pushed. So they pushed things like this thing called Best Buy Total, where you can get protection on all your devices for up to 24 months. Why am I bringing this up? Well, let's talk about like why people have certain views about jobs. You might have a certain view about your job because you like your boss and you like your work and you like the people that that you interacted with. And I would say I probably had the same kind of experience. But one of the reasons that I strongly did not like my job was because of things that were predatory, which were being pushed to customers that did not understand what they were getting into. So there were people like this is the whole thing about like connecting the bridge and understanding people instead of trying to like show why you're right or why someone's wrong, right? So let's say you come up to me and you're like, "Hey, how's it going, man?" And I'm like, "Okay." Like, and they're like, "Hey, do you like your job here?" Like, I like my job here. Um, and you're like, no, I mean, I do, but like there's some things that I really hate. And this person, they go and they say, well, I like the my job because I get to hang out with some friends that I've made at work, and the bosses are pretty cool, and I like interacting with customers. Most customers are nice, and they see I'm just trying to help them out. Like, explain to me why you don't like working here, so I can like understand where your viewpoint's coming from, right? So as a person, you hear that, you open up, and I go, well, I do like the people that I hang out with at work, and I like my bosses, and I like all the people that I deal with on a typical basis. Um, but the one thing I don't like is because of the Best Buy Total and Plus and protection plans that we push, because I think it's kind of predatory towards people because most of the protection and plans that we get is off of old people because they don't understand what they're getting into, um, and they think we convince them that they need something for something that they actually don't need, and then that just like morally I don't agree with that as a person. And then this person can hear my perspective and think like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying, because really Best Buy Total, it's like $180 a year, and unless you have like 6 devices or you're extremely clumsy and you drop all your shit, you don't really need a protection plan that's a subscription service, which is $180 a fucking year, right? Whereas you can get a TV and you can get like a 5-year protection, and it's like $220 for like a $1,300 TV. Whereas if you're getting Best Buy Total with a TV, then you have to pay that $179 every single fucking year. And after you pay for the first year and you pay for the second year, well, that's $340. So getting protection for 2 years is more expensive than 5 years. That doesn't make any fucking sense, right? And something else with Best Buy Total is after the second year, you had to put that device on your Best Buy Total and then pay an additional fee for that item because it's past the 2 year protection plan, which is super fucking predatory. Doesn't make any sense to me. It should just be if you get the protection plan, you get like the longest one for all the items in the store. That's just like how it like. If I was to push it, which I don't agree with it, that's how I would push it. So, like, because of my life experience as a person, I was around um, a lot of car dealerships that were near military bases, and the amount of money those places would charge because they know there's fucking people and they're getting out in the world for the first time in their life, and they've been locked away in AIT and basic. So when you go to the military, you're basically away for 6 months. You don't like have any connection with the outside world really until after those 6 months. So you go through your basic training, and then you go through like your specialized school. Specialized school can be longer or shorter depending on what you do. Like if you go for a linguistic job, your AIT is probably going to be like a fucking year long because you need to learn multiple languages and things of that nature. Which is pretty. It's crazy. It's actually crazy how people can do that because I don't get it. I would never be able to be a linguist. Um, you know, but my point is these car dealerships around the bases, they see these people getting out into the world for the first time and they know they're going to be able to take advantage of them because these people, they probably don't have anyone to like guide them or put them under the wing to show them like how the world is, how it actually works, right? So they put the APR up to like 20 fucking percent on a goddamn Hellcat because some kid out of AIT, he thinks he's like hot shit and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to get this fancy fucking race car," right? Where don't don't get a race car. It's not worth it, right? Like, especially as your first car, not worth it. Because it's just a car. Like, as long as it can get you to and from work, that's really all it needs to do, right? Or to and from, like, the grocery store, to or from the doctors, or, like, wherever you need to go, right? Like, that's what a car is. It's used for taking you places and, like, moving your stuff, really. Um, so that's, like, me showing my perspective as to why I feel the way that I do about um, the protection plans that like places like Best Buy offer, right? I love Best Buy. I love the people that I worked with. I think they're great. My manager Shay, we fucking love that guy. Chill dude. Um, and they knew as time went on that like I wasn't going to push protection plans because they wanted like two a day, like one credit card application, which is a fucking completely other thing in and on itself because I hate credit card companies. But, we're trying to make this video not go over 2 fucking hours. So we're just going to be like, you know, I don't think those things are good. I think they're predatory because, credit card is basically like a social credit score like China has, except it's for America, right? So not a fan of it, and they knew that. And over time, I just stopped giving less of a fuck and pushing it less because my my goal as the person that worked at Best Buy was to help. Like, what do you need, dog? Like, really, what do you actually need? Like, is this good for you to buy? Is it not good for you to buy? If you think that you might use a protection plan, I might offer it to you. If you're actually like gonna use it, like if you're an old person and you have no idea how to operate your devices, like I might offer it to you if you have like a ring system, a camera, like that kind of stuff, a smart TV, a laptop with like AI on it, a fucking like a smartphone, and you don't really know how it works. Then I might be like, okay, would this be worth it for you because you get 24/7 tech support, and if you have any questions, those people can answer them for you. That might be a situation where I would offer it, where like people might like use it in the proper way that I think. But that goes back to like tradition, like what do I believe as a person, right? And so that's going to change my opinion and my answer to, the why don't you like your job? Why do you like your job? Things like that. So that's just like a couple things to keep in mind whenever you're having a conversation with someone. Because typically, identity politics, you're talking about complex issues. And people try to simple it into a who is right argument where it shouldn't be about that. It should be about understanding the other person. And that is where we as a species need to develop skills that can help us with that. Like as I said, talking to the cat in the woods, and like if you wanted to come here, then you get down to the ground. You seem less threatening. You open up. You explain your reasoning and why you're unable to understand their perspective, and you ask them if they could shed some light on why they believe what they do, so that you can understand them better as a person in the discussion. um, and if you do some of those things that I listed, and you take into events like being able to break apart a business from a person, or a business in a government, or the politician, you look at the politician as who they are as a politician and who they are as a person, or the same thing with an idol. Are they influenced by financial gain, or power gain, or things like that, right? So that's about it, guys. I hope that you did have a good time listening to this stream. I'll probably upload this as a video to YouTube as well. If you guys want to listen to that, or if you missed something, then you know, just go listen to that on YouTube at Old Man Cyber 54. And as always, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful night.